ship called the Pale Crescent drifted through the dark space near the outer rim. Captain stood at the viewing port and watched the stars pass by slowly. His grayscale skin reflected the dim lights of the bridge. He had been a trader for 40 sails now. He had seen many strange things in the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for what weighed in his cargo hold. Human child. Slavers at Statenville 9 had sold her cheap. Too cheap should have been suspicious. Humans were rare in that part of space. They usually stayed in their own system, building their colonies and fighting their endless wars. When humans did appear in alien markets, they were expensive. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, all highly valued. The one was just a girl, small and thin with black hair that fell past her shoulders. Her skin was pale from months without proper sunlight. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they watched everything with a strange stillness that made it uncomfortable. Slavers said her name was. They said she was 8 cycles old by Terran counting. They said her colony had been raided and her family killed. They said she had not spoken a single word in 3 months. Anyway, he told himself it was kindness. He told himself he would find her a good home somewhere safe. But deep in his heart he knew the truth. He was curious. Every species in the Galactic Assembly had heard stories about humans. They were the nightmare creatures that parents used to frighten their children into behaving. They came from a death world called Earth where everything tried to kill everything else. They had crawled out of that hell and spread across the stars like a plague. The story said humans could not be broken. The story said humans never surrendered. The story said humans would chase an enemy across the entire galaxy just for revenge. This was just a child. Surely the stories were exaggerated. Beard agreed. The old had fought in the Second Expansion War. His shell still carried the scars from a human plasma rifle. He walked with a limp from where a human soldier had broken his leg in 3 places before managed to escape. You should base her, said on the 3rd day. Push her out the airlock while he sleeps. Tell no one we ever had her. He's a child, replied. He's a human. There is no such thing as a human child. Only small humans that have not finished growing yet. Ignored him. He ordered the crew to give food and water and a warm place to sleep in the cargo hold. He ordered them to treat her kindly. Perhaps she would learn to trust them. Perhaps she would speak. Did not speak. She ate what they gave her in small, careful bites. She drank her water slowly. She slept curled up in a corner wrapped in thermal blankets like a small animal hiding from predators. But she watched them, always watching with those dark, unblinking eyes. The engineer made a suggestion. The crew was bored. The journey between ports was long and empty. Why not have some fun with the little human? Not cruel fun, just a game. They would tell her war story. Famous battles where humans had killed thousands of alien soldiers. Terrible macros that filled the history books. They would see if they could make her cry. They would see if they could make her scream. They would see if they could finally make her show some emotion. He should refuse, but he was curious too. He wanted to know if the stories were true. He wanted to know what humans were really made of. At night, the crew gathered in the cargo hold, sat in her corner watching them approach. The ship's lights had been dimmed to create shadows. Had even brought a small lamp that flickered like a flame to make everything feel more dramatic. Forward, his shell gleamed in the flickering light. He lowered himself to the floor so his fate was level with the human child. His 3 eyes studied her closely. You know what your kind did at the Siege of Prime, little human? Not answer, she did not move. She barely seemed to breathe. His teeth were sharp and yellow. I will tell you, it was 200 cycles ago. The Empire controlled half the galaxy. They had never lost a war. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. Then they met humanity. Pause for effect. The crew leaned closer. Sent 300,000 warriors to take a human colony called New. 300,000 of the finest soldiers in the galaxy. They had plasma cannons and orbital support and tanks that could crush buildings into dust. The humans had only 10,000 defenders. 10,000 against 300,000. Lowered his voice to whisper. Retreated to a mountain pass, a narrow gap between 2 peaks. They built walls from the bodies of their fallen enemies. They fought for 40 days without sleep, without food, without hope. And when they finally broke through, they found only a handful of humans still alive. But behind those humans stood 2 million civilians who had escaped to safety. It leaned even closer to. Ground of that pass turned to red mud, red with blood. 10,000 humans killed 270,000 warriors before the end. The Empire never recovered. Does that story frighten you, little human? Crew waited. This was the moment. The child would cry, the child would scream, the child would finally break. Her head slightly. Her dark eyes moved from to the other crew members and then back again. Mountain pass, she did. Voice was soft and clear. It was the first time any of them had heard her speak. What blinked? Battle, you said it was a mountain pass. How wide was it? Look at the other crew members. This was not the reaction he expected. Perhaps 200 meters, he said uncertainly. It was a small expression, but it changed her entire face. Suddenly, she did not look like a frightened child. She looked like something else entirely. The attacking waves, standard frontal assault. They were proud warriors. They charged with honor. Stupid, said. Her voice was flat and cold. You do not assault a defendant with superior numbers. You are just feeding soldiers into a meat grinder. They did not lose because humans are strong. They lost because their commanders were idiots. Eyes filled the cargo hold. Her blanket around her shoulders. She looked at the stunned faces of the alien crew. If you want to scare me with war stories, she said quietly, you will have to find better ones, and may learn what those stories actually mean. Closed her eyes and went to sleep. They slept well that night. The crew of the Pale Crescent lay in their bunks and stared at the ceiling and thought about what they had seen. A human child had called 300,000 warriors stupid. She had criticized their attacks like a teacher grading a student's homework. She had not shown any fear at all. Called a meeting the next morning. The crew gathered in the small con room and spoke in whispers even though it was far away in the cargo hold. Just trying to seem brave, said. The engineer's 4 arms were crossed tightly over his chest. Children do that. They pretend to be strong when they are scared. She looked scared to you? Asked. His voice was harsh. I have seen humans in battle. I have seen what they look like when they fight. That child had the same eyes. The same cold, dead eyes that watch you and calculate how best to kill you. He's 8 cycles old, Medical Officer said softly. Her blue fur was ruffled with anxiety. What could a child possibly know about war? Nobody had an answer. The decision, he would talk to the child himself. He would find out what she really was. Found sitting in her usual corner of the cargo hold. She was reading something. Blinked his 3 eyes in surprise. She was reading an actual book, a physical book made of paper and binding. He had not seen such a thing in decades. Most species used datapads and holographic displays. Paper books were ancient relics. Where did you get that? He asked. Looked up. Her dark eyes studied him for a moment before she answered. It was my mother's. The slavers let me keep it. They did not think it was valuable. Closer and looked at the cover. The words were in hewn script, but his translator in blank converted them automatically. Principles of Applied Warfare, 7th edition. Your mother owned a book at war. Mother wrote parts of the book, turned a page carefully. The paper was old and fragile, but she handled it with obvious love. She taught combat theory at the Academy on Mars before she died. Ordered himself to sit on a cargo crate. His legs were tired and his hearts were beating faster than normal. What happened to her? They attacked our colony. They came for slaves and resources. My father died in the first wave. He was a farmer. He had never held a weapon before that day. He killed 7 raiders with a harvesting tool before they shot him. Voice was calm and steady. She could have been discussing the weather. My mother organized the defense. She held them off for 3 days, long enough for the emergency signal to reach the nearest Terran patrol, but she took a wound on the second day, internal bleeding. Died in my arms on the morning of the 4th day, 12 hours before the rescue ships arrived. Not know what to say. He had expected tears. He had expected grief. But the child spoke about her parents' death like a soldier giving a battle report. I'm sorry, he finally managed. You did not kill them, looked at him directly. You want to know why I was not scared last night, why I corrected your navigator story. You want to know what I am. Yes, sir. The book and held it against her chest. My grandfather was general. He commanded the 14th Terran Expeditionary Force during the Outer Rim campaigns. He won 9 major battles and never lost a single engagement. My grandmother was Colonel Shen. She wrote the tactical doctrine for urban pacification that the Terran military still uses today. He paused and let the word sink in. Family has been fighting wars for 7 generations. Every child in our line learns military history before they learn to count. We study battles the way other children study games. We memorize formations and tactics and strategies the way other children memorize songs. Something cold growing in his chest. It was not quite fear. It was something deeper. You are saying your people raise their children to be soldiers. We raise our children to survive. Opened the book again and showed him a page covered in diagrams and notes. This chapter discusses the proper response to ambushed scenarios. My mother made me memorize it when I was 5. She said that someday I might need it. She was right. When the raiders came, I remembered everything she taught me. I hid in a place they would never think to look. I stayed silent for 18 hours while they searched. I survived. Because of the book. Of everything, the book, the lesson. The stories my grandparents told me about the wars they fought. Traced a finger over her mother's handwriting in the margin. Human children do not grow up hearing fairy tales about princes and princesses living happily ever after. We grow up hearing about soldiers who held impossible position. Medics who saved wounded comrades under any fire. Pilots who crashed their ships in any vessels to protect their home. Heroes are not magical, they are real, and they all have one thing in common. What is that? Never gave up, no matter how bad things got, no matter how hopeless it seemed, they fought until the end. She looked at with those dark, unblinking eyes. That is what humans are. That is what human children are. We are not soft. We are not weak. We are just small versions of the same thing that conquered a deaf world and spread across the stars. About all the stories he had heard about humanity, the massacres, the last stands, the impossible victories against overwhelming odds, he had always assumed those stories were exaggerated, propaganda meant to frighten other species. Now he was not so sure. What will you do now, he asked. Where will you go? It was such a human gesture, so casual and unconcerned. I do not know. I have nowhere to go, no family left, no home. You could stay with us on this ship. Words came out before he could stop them. He did not know why he said them. Perhaps it was pity. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was something else entirely. Studied him for a long moment. Why would you want that? Do not know, admitted. But you are alone. We travel to many places. Perhaps we can find somewhere safe for you. Somewhere you can start again. Ghost of a smile crossed his face. It was small and sad and it disappeared almost immediately. But it was there. You, she said softly. But I should warn you. Wherever I go, trouble seems to follow. My grandmother used to say that war is attracted to our family like metal to a magnet. Laughed nervously. We are simple traders. We avoid trouble. You have nothing to worry about. Not laugh. She just looked at him with those alien eyes in that young face. See, he said, words spread through the ship like fire through dry grass. The human child knew things, strange things, terrible things. She could look at a battle and find the mistakes that no one else could see. She could explain why armies that should have won had lost. She could take part famous victories and show that they were actually disasters caused by enemy stupidity. First, the crew came to her as a joke. They would gather in the cargo hold during the quiet hours between hyperspace jumps and tell her stories of famous battles. They expected her to be impressed. They expected her to be frightened. They wanted to see if they could find a war story horrible enough to finally make her cry. They never found one. Gare brought her the Battle of Shattered Moons. It was one of the most famous human victories in galactic history. 3 small human destroyers against a massive alien dreadnought. Everyone knew the story. The humans had won despite impossible odds. To the story while sitting cross-legged on her pile of blankets. When finished speaking, she was quiet for a long moment. Only the formation, he said. At a holographic display and projected the battle in miniature above the cargo hold floor. Blue dots represented the human ships. A large red shape represented the dreadnought. The projection showed the positions and movements of all vessels during the engagement. They did it for exactly 4 seconds. We're not trying to survive, she said. What do you mean? Look at their approach. She pointed at the blue dots with one small finger. They came in at maximum speed with no evasive maneuvers. They knew they were going to die. They were not fighting to live. They were fighting to kill. Took his head, but they won. They destroyed the dreadnought. Destroyed themselves too. All 3 ships lost with all hands. That is not a victory. That is a sacrifice. Traced the path of the lead destroyer. See how they timed their approach? The dreadnought's shields were cycling on a predictable pattern. 17 seconds between each reset. The humans waited until the exact moment of shield reset to breach the defensive barrier. Then they used their own reactor cores as weapons. They flew directly into the dreadnought's bridge section and detonated. How could they know the shield pattern? Got bet with those dark steady eyes. Because they study you. Humans always study their enemies. We watch, we learn, we find weaknesses, and then we exploit them without mercy. The officer brought her the massacre at Drone Field said. It was a terrible story. A human fleet had destroyed an entire alien armada using nothing but automated weapon platforms. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers had died in less than an hour. Listen, then he shook her head. Admiral made 3 critical mistakes. First, he spread his fleet too thin. He created gaps in his formation large enough to fly a cruiser through. Second, he admitted all his forces at once instead of holding reserves. Third, he ignored his sensor officers when they reported unusual readings from the asteroid field. Pulled up a display of the battle and highlighted the key moments. The commander did not have superior firepower. She had superior intelligence. She knew exactly where your ships would be because your admiral followed standard doctrine without increativity. She planted her weapon platforms in advance and waited for your fleet to walk into the trap. There at the fraction, you made it sound so simple. War is simple. Most species lose because they make it complicated. They worry about honor and tradition and following the rules. Humans do not care about any of those things. We only care about winning. You brought her The Last Stand of Haven Colony. It was supposed to be the most heroic human story ever told. A single company of soldiers defending a civilian shelter against an army of alien invaders. They had fought to the last soldier and saved 10,000 lives. To the story with her eyes closed. When finished, she opened her eyes inside. That is not how it happened. What do you mean? That is the official historical record. The record was written by politicians who wanted to make humanity look noble and heroic. Stood up and walked to the holographic display. She began adjusting the positions of the units. The real story is different. The company commander was a woman named Lee Myra. She was 23 years old. She had been a soldier for only 2 years. With more pieces around the display. The enemy surrounded the shelter. She knew she could not win a straight fight, though he did not fight fair. She contaminated the local water supply with industrial chemical. She rigged dead bodies with explosive traps. She sent fake surrender signals to lure enemy officers into ambush zone. She violated every law of warfare that exists. Crew stared at the display. The battle looked completely different now. End of the first day, he had killed more enemies through tricks and traps than through actual combat. The invaders were terrified. They did not know what was real and what was a lie. They started shooting at shadows. They started killing each other by accident. When reinforcements finally arrived 3 days later, they found Lee Myra standing alone in a field of enemy corpses. She had not slept in 70 hours. She could barely remember her own name, but she had won. What happened to her? She was given a medal and promoted. Then she spent 6 months in a hospital recovering from what she had done. Turned off the display. That is the truth about human heroes. We do not win because we are brave or honorable. We win because we are willing to do whatever it takes. We break rules, we cheat, we lie, and we never ever stop fighting. Crew was silent for a long time after that. The captain spoke. He had been listening from the doorway without anyone noticing. Are you telling us these things? Why are you showing us that the stories we heard are wrong? Looked at him. For a moment she seemed very tired, very old, much older than 8 years should allow. You need to understand, she said softly. You picked me up from slavers. You gave me food and shelter and a place to sleep. Someday you might be in danger. Someday you might need to fight. And when that day comes, I want you to know the truth about what it means to fight like a human. Why would we ever need to fight like humans? Oh, that small said smile again. This galaxy is not safe. It has never been safe. There are things out there worse than slavers, worse than raiders, worse than anything you can imagine. She picked up her mother's book and held it close. My family learned that lesson a long time ago. Now I'm teaching it to you, whether you want to learn or not. Returned to her corner and began to read. Crew drifted away one by one. They did not tell any more war stories after that. They did not try to scare the human child anymore. Days into their journey, the trouble came. He was asleep in his quarters when the alarm began to scream. Red lights flashed throughout the ship. The computer voice announced emergency status in flat mechanical tones. Multiple contacts detected. Hostile signatures confirmed. All crew to battle station. To the bridge with his heart pounding. Navigator was already there staring at the sensor display with all 3 eyes wide open. Raiders said. His voice was dead and hollow. 7 ships. They dropped out of hyperspace 2 minutes ago. They have us surrounded. Looked at the display and felt his stomach twisted in knots. They were famous throughout the outer rim. They were pirates and slavers who preyed on merchant vessels. Their ships were fast and heavily armed. Their crews were brutal and efficient. They never left survivors. Red dots formed a circle around the single blue dot that represented the pale crescent. The formation was perfect. Classic pincer movement designed to trap prey and prevent escape. Can we run? Asked. No, they are blocking all escape vectors. Our engines are not fast enough to break through. Can we fight? But there was no humor in it. We are a cargo hauler. We have 2-point defense guns designed to shoot down asteroids. They have military-grade weapons. We would last maybe 30 seconds. You arrived on the bridge followed by medical officer. They both looked at the center display and understood immediately. Nobody needed to explain. The situation was obvious. The pale crescent was going to be captured. The crew was going to be killed or sold in slavery. The ship was going to be stripped for parts. You should surrender, said quietly. Maybe they will be merciful. Not know the meaning of mercy. Again entering commands into his console. I am deleting our navigation records. They will not learn the locations of our trading partners from us at least. To argue, he wanted to find some hope, but he had been a trader for 40 years. He knew when a situation was hopeless. The cargo hold door opened and walked onto the bridge. Still wearing her simple sleeping clothes. Her black hair was messy from sleep. Her bare feet made no sound on the metal floor, but her eyes were awake and alert. Those dark, unblinking eyes that seemed to see everything. The formation is wrong, she said. Everyone turned to look at her. For a moment, nobody spoke. Oh, this is not the time for games. The voice was harsher than he intended. Fear was making him angry. We are about to die. We're about to die because you are acting like prey. Walk to the center display and study it carefully. Look at their position. They are using a standard Type 4 pincer formation. It is designed to trap ships that try to flee, but look at the 2 flaying vessels on the right side. He pointed at 2 of the red dots. Too far forward. They broke formation early because they are eager. They want to be the first ones to reach us. That means their captains are young and hungry for glory. It also means they create a weakness in the formation. Took his head. Even if there is a weakness, we cannot exploit it. We are not a warship. You do not need to be a warship. You just need to be unexpected. Look at Captain directly. They are predators. They have hunted merchant ships for decades. They know exactly how merchant ships behave. They run. They hide. They surrender. They beg. What else can we do? You can attack. Let's fill the bridge. The word hung in the air like something dangerous. Attack. His voice cracked. That is insane. It's human. Pulled herself up onto the captain's chair and sat on the armrest so she could see all the displays clearly. Listen to me carefully. We have about 4 minutes before they close to weapons range. If you do exactly what I say, we might survive this. If you do not, we will definitely die. But the child, 8 years old, bare feet, messy hair, she should have been crying. She should have been hiding in the cargo hold. Instead, she was sitting on his chair giving orders like a fleet admiral. He thought about all the stories she had told them, all the battles she had analyzed, all the tactics she had explained. He thought about her grandfather, the general, and her grandmother, the colonel, and her mother who had taught warfare at the academy on Mars. What do we do? He asked. It was not her usual small, sad smile. There was something different, something fierce and bright and terrifying. Rotate the ship 40 degrees to starboard, then accelerate directly at the lead enemy vessel, maximum burn. You want us to fly toward them. Want us to charge them. There's a difference. Pointed at the lead ship on the display. That is the command vessel. You always put their senior captain at the front of the formation. If we fly directly at him at full speed, he will not know how to react. Prey does not attack predators. His brain will freeze for a few seconds while he tries to understand what is happening. And then what? We dump our cargo, all of it, directly into his path. Our cargo is worth 300,000 credits. Your lives are worth more, are they not? That his crew was trembling, had all four arms wrapped around himself, was crying silently. They were all going to die anyway. What did they have to lose? He said, rotate ship, prepare for maximum burn. They for only a second. Then he began entering commands. The pale crescent groaned as its thrusters fired. The ship turned slowly until its nose was pointed directly at the command vessel. Obey doors ready, report. His voice was steadier now. Having something to do was helping him focus. For my signal, was watching the sensor display with complete concentration. They will react in about 10 seconds. The flying ships will try to close the gap, but they move too far forward. They will not make it in time. Pale crescent began to accelerate. The thrust pushed everyone back in their seats. On the sensor display, the blue dot was moving directly toward the red formation. Sand said 4, 3, 2, 1 now. Lead ship hesitated. Just as predicted, its captain could not understand what was happening. Prey was supposed to run. Prey was not supposed to attack. The hesitation lasted only 3 seconds. But 3 seconds was enough. Cargo now commanded, then hard burn to port. Release. 200 tons of raw mining ore exploded out of the cargo bay and scattered across space like a cloud of deadly shrapnel. The lead ship tried to evade, but it was too late. The debris cloud slammed into its forward shields. Alarm screamed. Sensors scrambled. For a brief moment, the command vessel was blind and confused. Pale crescent turned hard to the left. Its engine screamed at maximum power. The ship shot through the gap between the confused command vessel and the still glowing flying ships. Coordinates, said calmly. Any direction, it does not matter, just get us into hyperspace. It's already working. His 3 hands moved across the console faster than I'd ever seen. Numbers flashed. Calculation completed. The hyperspace drive began to spin up. Our pursuing roared. Her voice was high and frightened. 3 ship breaking formation to follow. Will not catch us. Was watching the calculations on the navigation display. Their engines need 30 seconds to reach full power after a direction change. We will be gone in 20. Pale crescent shuddered as the hyperspace drive reached full charge. The stars outside the viewport began to stretch and blur. Behind them, the ships fired their weapons, but it was too late. The shot passed through empty space where the pale crescent had been a moment before. The ship was gone, swallowed by hyperspace, safe. Pale crescent drifted in empty space far from any star system. The hyperspace drive was cooling down. The crew was breathing again. Nobody had spoken for almost 10 minutes. Sat in his chair and stared at the viewport. His hands were still shaking. His hearts were still pounding. He had been certain they were going to die. He had already made peace with his ancestors. He had already said goodbye to his life. Then an 8-year-old human child had saved them all. And to look at, she had climbed down from the armrest and was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. She looked tired, not frightened or excited or proud, just tired, like she had done something difficult but ordinary. How did you know that would work? Asked. I did not know for certain, but I calculated that we had a 73% chance of survival if we attacked and a 0% chance if we ran or surrendered. 73 is better than 0. Calculated turned from his console. His 3 eyes were wide with something between fear and wonder. In your head, in 4 minutes. They made me practice emergency scenarios every day. She would give me a situation and I had to come up with a response in less than 60 seconds. A small, sad smile crossed her face. She said that in real combat you do not have time to think. You have to know the answers before the questions are asked. The officer moved closer. Her blue fur was still raised with leftover fear, but her voice was gentle. Where did you learn about pirate formation? I did not learn specifically about pirates. I learned about predator psychology, how hunters think, how they expect prey to behave. All predators are the same in the end. They depend on fear. They depend on their victims doing what they expect. When something unexpected happens, they freeze. Looked at the crew with those dark alien eyes. Learned that a long time ago on Earth, our world was full of predators, big cats and wolves and bears and crocodiles. We were small and weak and slow. We should have been extinct. But we learned to fight back. We learned that predators are not prepared for prey that does not run. We learned that surprise and aggression can beat size and strength. But this, it made a terrible kind of sense. Humans had not evolved on a safe world. They had evolved on a nightmare planet where everything was trying to kill them. Of course, they had learned to fight. They had no other choice. But as now asked, we lost all our cargo. We have nothing to trade. Have your ship, you have your lives, you have your freedom. Stood up and brushed dust from our sleeping clothes. Cargo can be replaced, dead crew cannot. We are ruined, 300,000 credits. You are alive, everything else is temporary. Walked toward the bridge door, then she stopped and turned back. I want to thank you, she said quietly. You did not have to listen to me. You did not have to trust me. Most species would have ignored a child during a crisis. You gave me a chance. Saved our lives, said. We should be thanking you. Saved each other, smiled again. That small, sad smile that never quite reached her eyes. That is what survival means. Nobody makes it alone, not even human. It disappeared through the door and went back to the cargo hold. Crew sat in silence for a long time after she left. The navigator spoke. His voice was strange and hollow like a man who had just witnessed something impossible. Captain, what are we going to do with her? A deep breath. He had been thinking about this question since the moment first corrected his war story. He had considered many options, selling her to another trader, leaving her at a space station, finding an orphanage that would take her. Now he knew there was only one real choice. They're going to take her home, he said, back to human space, back to her own people. It's a long journey, dangerous too, that will be looking for us. Stood up and walked to the viewport. The stars were cold and distant, but somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was the world that had created creatures like. But she does not belong with us. She belongs with her own kind, with people who can teach her properly, with people who can help her become what she's meant to be. What is she meant to be? But the way he had studied the pirate formation, the calm voice, the steady hands, the complete lack of fear, he thought about her family of generals and colonels and warriors. Something dangerous, he had quietly, something that the galaxy has never seen before. Journey took 3 months. They traveled carefully and avoided the maze shipping lane. Twice they did scout ships and had to hide in asteroid fields until the danger passed. Spent most of her time reading her mother's book and practicing tactical simulations on the ship's computer. She would talk to the crew about what she saw in the simulation. She would point out patterns and weaknesses and opportunities that none of them had noticed. It was like watching an artist's work. She understood war the way some people understood music or mathematics. It was part of her nature, built into her blood and bones. The last day before they reached, human space captain found her standing at the viewport in the cargo hold. She was looking at the stars with an expression he had never seen before, something between longing and determination. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked. "I do not have a home anymore. That colony is gone. My family is dead." She did not turn around. "But I have a purpose. My mother gave it to me before she died. She made me promise to survive, to learn, to become strong enough that nothing could ever hurt me again." "And then what?" She turned. Her dark eyes were fierce and bright. "Then I make sure nothing like what happened to my colony ever happens again. To anyone, ever." Chill run down his spine. There was not a child making empty promises. There was a soldier making a vow. He had no doubt that she would keep it. "What will you do when you reach your people?" "The military, study, train, rise through the ranks." She smiled, and for once it was not a sad smile. It was confident, "Sir. I have my mother's book. I have my grandfather's name. I have everything I need to become what I was born to be. Warrior. Protector." Next morning, the Pale Crescent crossed into human-controlled space. A Terran patrol ship intercepted them within hours, explained the situation. He showed them the child. He told them about her family name and her military heritage. Humans were skeptical at first. Then they checked their records. General Colonel Shin, the destroyed colony, the missing child. Everything matched. Took aboard the patrol ship. Before she left, she stood at the airlock and looked back at the crew one last time. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "Thank you for saving our lives," replied. "I was just doing what I was taught." She held up her mother's book. "Take care of yourselves, stay alert, stay careful, and remember what I taught you." "What was that?" "Run from predators." She smiled that fierce bright smile one more time, charged them instead. Then she was gone. Years later, Captain received a message. He was old by then, retired from trading, living quietly on his. The message was from a human, a woman named Admiral. She commanded something called the First Combined Fleet, a coalition of ships from 12 different species united against a new threat called the Void Swarm. The message was simple. "You're for giving me a chance. I never forgot. Watch the news feeds tomorrow. You will see what humans do when they stop running." Next day, every news feed in the galaxy showed the same thing. 1,000 ships charging into the heart of the Void Swarm. Leading them was a woman with dark, unblinking eyes who had once been a small orphan sleeping in a cargo hold. She was still carrying her mother's book. She was still teaching the galaxy how to fight. For now, they were too busy being scared themselves. Somehow those two simple words made Captain more afraid than any war story ever could. The crew did not move for a very long time.